Welcome back, everybody. This is Worldwide Coral Podcast number 5. And I'm here with Keri O'Neil from the Florida Aquarium. How you doing, Keri?
Great. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Good to see you again.
Same. Josh is also in the house.
Hard to believe it's number 5.
Number 5 already. Thanks for coming over. I mean, I know it's close, but it's not that close with the traffic coming from the Tampa area.
Yeah, it took me about an hour and a half, a little bit longer than I expected. So
That's good.
Thanks for. I know. No major accidents on I-4, so.
Sounds like she has a heavy foot.
Yeah, right.
So anyhow, we wanted to bring you in today. You have some interesting stuff going on with the Florida Aquarium, and if you want to kick it off, just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Florida and how you got with the Florida Aquarium and got involved with the projects.
Yeah, so I started, I first fell in love with corals in the ocean coming on summer vacations to Florida with my parents, in Fort Lauderdale every year. It was the first time I ever went snorkeling with my dad, and I always, just was fascinated with the undersea life and the reefs. And also inspired by going to the National Aquarium in Baltimore. I'm a Maryland girl. I grew up just south of Baltimore. Go Ravens. And, I always would go to the National Aquarium on school trips, and it's an amazing aquarium, and I was just fascinated with aquariums. And I remember growing up thinking, I want to work here one day, and that was my goal and my love for the ocean, and then seeing it right in front of my face in Baltimore City. And I did. I went and I did my undergrad at University of Maryland, and my first internship was at National Aquarium in Baltimore. And then my first job out of college was there as well. So I worked there for 10 years.
Made it.
I made it. I did it. I got my childhood dream.
Nice.
I've been living that dream, really ever since. And I worked with big coral tanks there. I was a primary keeper on a 7,500-gallon live Indo-Pacific coral tank there for years. Love that tank still, the Pacific Coral Reef exhibit there. And but then I decided I wanted to go back to grad school and do some more field-based kind of coral work. And I moved, after a short stint in Australia, which is a long side story, I moved to Florida to do my master's at Nova Southeastern in Fort Lauderdale. And there I got to grow corals in a tank on land that we called a land-based coral nursery in the science world, and actually plant those corals back out onto a reef for restoration. So that was actually my master's work. So that kind of was the first time I was able to bring my aquarium husbandry experience to meet up with coral restoration work, and that was in 2009. And then I've kind of been working at the interface of those two worlds ever since. I did some time in environmental consulting and doing coral relocation projects and outplanting projects. And then I came to the Florida Aquarium in 2016. I started there. Wow. And all we had was one 1,500 square foot greenhouse with some somewhat ramshackle life support systems that were sort of piecemealed together from donated equipment and a handful of corals. And now we have almost 10,000 square feet of coral breeding and rearing and gene banking space, and it's all native Florida corals. And we were the first facility to induce spawning in Atlantic corals, based on the work of Jamie Craigs that everybody's very familiar with, using those same techniques. And we've now spawned 14 different species, and we raise 10,000 or more, juvenile corals every year to go back for restoration projects in Florida. So it's been a crazy ride almost. It's been 9 years now with the Florida Aquarium. And we've done so much. It blows my mind, every day go to work. And
I was just getting ready to say that. I feel like 2016 to now, as much as you guys have done over there, that's a pretty big accomplishment, especially when it wasn't really put together at that point. Right?
Yeah, we had just started bringing in Atlantic pillar coral. I think we had maybe 15 or 20 colonies at the time, and they were being rescued from a disease outbreak that at that time we didn't really know how extreme that disease was going to become. It had just started, but people had realized, pillar corals are dying, pretty much every single one of them. Their only hope of saving this species is to actually get them out of the ocean and put them in aquariums. So that was the first species I worked with there.
Wow.
And that was the first species that we ended up spawning in 2019 as well. And that's just got uplisted to endangered under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. It's the first coral ever to be listed as endangered under under U.S. law. So
Makes you
it's
feel
been
proud, huh?
it gives me chills sitting here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like it's
Now you're doing big things over there over the years.
pretty
It's been-
wild.
Yeah, it's been wild. Now you guys do spawning in captivity. That's pretty amazing. We did a video on that maybe a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I was just taken back by the progress you guys made over there with the spawning.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that project.
Yeah, so, we had learned about the work that Jamie was doing, and, Jamie has done just such amazing work in literally like a small closet in a museum in London. It is such a small space, but he made so much progress on that that we kind of said, you know what, we had been collecting spawn from corals in the wild or in ocean-based coral nurseries and doing the fertilization and trying to settle and raise the larvae, and that works, that's fine. But for something like the pillar coral, they weren't really in nurseries at the time. They were collected from all over the reef, the whole span of Florida's coral reef, and brought to our center. So we said, these corals aren't going to recover on their own in the wild. They're functionally extinct. There's only 20 of them left on Florida's coral reef, and they're just remnant, small pieces. They're far apart. Corals, when they spawn, the eggs and sperm go up into the water, and they have to manage to find each other. So if they're miles from each other, that's just never going to happen. Yeah. And they only have tiny pieces left. So we're like, this is really what we need to do for the future of this species, is to be able to captively spawn it and propagate the juveniles. So this is what we do for other endangered species all over the world, right? This is what we do for pandas. This is what we do for other endangered species on land. So let's try to actually do this for an endangered coral species. And also do it in a way, we call it biosecurity, where the animals could be released back into the wild. And that's a part of what we do that a lot of people, I think, don't understand, is the biosecurity level that I can take these baby corals and put them in the ocean, and get a permit to do that, because we track where everything in our aquarium comes from. The live rock, the snails, every single thing originates from the Florida Keys. And even its whole process from collection to transport to our facility, we know it doesn't come in contact with anything from outside the state of Florida. And that's what allows us to release the corals back out into the ocean. So yeah, long story, but we set up 4 spawning tanks originally and had our first spawning event at the Florida Aquarium in 2019. Okay. And we had a couple species spawn that year, actually. The pillar coral was the first one, and then the maize coral, and then grooved brain coral, and they just kept coming after that. And we successfully produced thousands of larvae and hundreds of settlers from that event. And that just changed the game. Now we don't need to go out to the field. We don't have to rely on the weather being good enough to go out on the boat to get the wild spawn. You don't have to dive all night. We shift the sunset time to happen right around
That's
lunch.
Neat. Yeah.
So it just makes everything so much easier. It opens up a whole new world for what you can do to actually help a species. And now you can talk about things like adaptive breeding and selective breeding, and how do you breed a more resilient coral. We couldn't do any of that unless we could make them spawn in the first place.
You're doing something now with the staghorn, aren't you?
Yeah, the elkhorn mostly. Yeah. So crazy work with the elkhorn, which is, by the way, like one of the most ridiculously difficult corals to keep.
Right?
I mean, those things love... You can't give them enough flow, enough light. I mean, they are so sensitive. The slightest wiggles in alkalinity, and they're like, I'm just not happy. Everything just has to be dialed in. And I give that to Matt Wade right now, who has spoken at RAP in Orlando. He's the primary keeper on the elkhorn right now, and he's awesome in those things. You've seen him before. You should come by again, because they are like this thick. They're just 2-3 feet long and 6 inches thick now. I mean, they're crazy. But they're really difficult to spawn and keep. But we do get regular spawning from them. It's not as much as we would like. We're still dialing that in. But with our partners at the University of Miami, we're able, in Dr. Andrew Baker's lab, we're able to import 15 pieces of elkhorn coral from Honduras.
Okay.
And these corals live in a very warm bay called Tela Bay. And this is in partnership with a group called Telemarine that works on the conservation of the corals in that bay. And these elkhorn coral thickets are stunning, like thriving. They are just amazing, probably some of the healthiest I've ever seen. And so they were able to take fragments from those parent colonies and import them into the U.S., and we now have 7 of them at our center. And we don't know exactly why those corals do so well in this bay. This bay gets hot every summer. It has a lot of coastal pollution. It could be the nutrients in the bay help balance out. It could be the turbidity keeps the light down. And, there's a lot of factors there. But it also could be something genetic about those individuals. It could be the symbiont that they have in their tissues might be different. So we're looking at a lot of different things there. But we were able to successfully spawn them last year and cross them with our Florida corals. So we have now what we're referring to as the Flaunderan elkhorn corals. And we made like 240 of those successfully. Wow. And we just outplanted with the University of Miami the first 30 in July. And then there will be a bunch more going out over the next year. And then they spawned again. So breaking news, a couple weeks ago, they did spawn on a full cycle at our center. So we can expect those to keep spawning.
Yeah. Also in warm water in captivity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we don't keep them, like the bay gets up to like 90 degrees. Wow. Yeah, and like even right now this year our reefs in Florida got up to 90 to 92 even, I heard from one person. Yeah. So this is actually, it's not as like blown up in the news right now, but if you look at the data, this summer was the second hottest.
And the one before that was
2023 was like when most of the elkhorn died.
Yeah.
All of the rock flowers, all the Recordia, they all melted.
Yep. 2023 was just absolutely horrific and depressing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we were in the Keys doing a job marathon. It was the hottest.
That same week. That's when it all happened.
And you saw everything melting.
Well, we didn't actually go to the Reefs, but the install that we were doing was right in Marathon, and it was the single hottest day that I recall ever working outside.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And the water temperatures on the Fore Reef then were in the 90s consistently.
Worse than bathwater.
Yeah. And I mean, we all know as aquarists that care for our animals, I mean, you're not going to run your tank at 90 degrees.
No way.
And they don't get exposed to that for any period of time, so that swing is too much.
Exactly. And I mean, they experienced this for weeks, and the elkhorn coral just hit a point where they just it wasn't even bleaching. They just died. I mean, they just melted.
No coming back,
Yeah, and then so did a lot of the soft corals, and now the rock flower anemones. Like I hadn't heard that about the rock flower anemones, but yeah, it was major impact. And then, 2024 wasn't as bad, and now we're seeing this summer. Luckily, it looks like temperatures starting to come down now. Like if we kept on this rate for another couple weeks, we could be experiencing a pretty heavy loss again. It's just too much, too frequently. We all know how slow these things grow, right? It's you're just losing too much.
Yeah, that's a great thing you guys are doing over there by trying to make it more heat tolerant. That's new species.
That's the key is trying to figure that out. It still only time will tell how much we can really gain. We know we can gain a little bit just by changing the symbiont. There's more heat tolerant symbionts or zooxanthellae. But the trouble is getting the coral to keep it when you put it back in the wild. That's the really annoying part, is like we can grow them with, it's called durastinium, or clade D is the older way we would have said that, is more heat tolerant symbiont. And we can grow them with that in the lab, and that's been done, time and time again. But you put them back out in the ocean, and then they get exposed to another one that might suit them better for whatever reason, and they spit out the durastinium, and they pick up something else, and then the hot summer comes, and bam! It's like, how do you get them to actually keep that symbiont might be the key, and we work a lot on that with the University of Miami.
Is a byproduct nutrient different from one zooxanthellae to the other?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So it is thought that durastinium can be more of like a parasite at times, in that it does not translocate as much nutrients to the host and can actually use nutrients. And it's some research has shown that corals with Durstinium don't grow as quickly because they're not getting as much nutrition from their symbiont.
But it may be a survival mechanism too.
Exactly. And that may be why, for whatever reason, that the coral doesn't kick them out when it's hot. And they do kick out other symbionts when it gets too hot. And I'm not an expert on symbiont chemistry, but they definitely do have different interactions with the host. And then some, like the Caribbean acroporids, can really only host Symbiodinium or Durstinium. So there's like two genera that they tend to host, one or the other. But then there's B and C, which is Breviolum and Cladocopium. So that's more like your brain corals and such. But so corals can be very specific for what type of symbiont they like, and that's not totally understood either. Like why wouldn't you find this one in an acropora or not? So there's a lot to learn there, and
research. Yeah,
I always say like taking care of corals is really just taking care of their symbionts.
Sure.
Because if the symbionts aren't happy, the whole system falls apart. So everything about the nutrient balances and the ratios and the light and the flow, it's all about keeping the symbionts happy.
Yeah, and then there's also things like trace, which act as transport mechanisms too.
Exactly. Like key elements in the chemical mechanisms.
Then you're
in
taking the
systems.
two animals and you're formulating a connection between them with the water environment.
Exactly, and how their ability to live together is completely dependent on the environment around them and the water flow removing reactive oxygen species.
Which is why your yield from the elkhorn is not quite there yet.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It has to, it's something that elkhorn, it lives in its natural environment is in the high wave energy, wave breaking. They really are nature's seawall. Like a thicket of elkhorn coral can just withstand crashing waves like nothing. And that, we just can't replicate that.
No.
And I mean, you could, but it's going to cost a lot of money.
You gotta have a lid on the tank.
Yeah. But there's something about their environment, their nutrition, something that we don't quite get right all the time with the elkhorn coral. They're just very needy. But as we know, some corals are a little more tolerant of things, and others are much more specialist.
No doubt about it. What I like about where you come from more the science side. We come from more the hobby side. But when we sit and talk, it's like we kind of join it together. It's like a really good marriage between the science and the hobby here in 2025 for sure.
Yeah, we've come a long way with that. And I've also been, I've been a hobbyist at home for years as well. And I think coming from the public aquarium background helps with that. Just really I've come into the science side from the aquarium side, as an aquarist first, before I ever really started doing the research side. And I've always, wanted the two worlds to come together. And I think now, the Reef is the one that's telling us that we need to come together. Yeah. As we're losing corals across the globe, I think people are more and more turning to land-based technology and aquariums to look at how can we save it. And how can we? It's both through education and teaching people that it's important, and having them be inspired by the beauty of an aquarium.
Sure.
That goes so far. It goes such a long way, and I think people don't appreciate that. And then also using the technology that's developed for this hobby. To use that for conservation. All of the lighting systems, the control systems, everything that we do to spawn these corals is made by hobbyist equipment manufacturers. One day it'll probably be scaled to a higher production level, and there are people working on that. But for right now, literally my whole spawning room that creates millions of coral larvae a year is still run on aperture equipment, radions and an apex. It does the job. And it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the hobby.
No, it's true.
So since 2016, was there a change in the mission of the Florida Aquarium based on the work that you were doing, or was the mission always the same?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the mission, they had a very, very strong will and belief that conservation is the important mission of a public aquarium. And they very, very much had been working on coral conservation before I got there. They had been working on spawning in the field. They had been working on some coral rescues and relocations that happened, quite a long time ago. And they wanted to scale it up. And that was really what made me come there in the first place, is they were in the very early stages, but they really wanted it. And they had a piece of land that they had already dedicated to it. They had big plans, and I was like, and they were like, we really need somebody that can make this come to fruition. And, that's why I picked up my life and moved to Tampa and was like, well, I'm in, let's do it.
Timing,
and at that time, I had no idea we'd be spawning corals in tanks. I thought we'd be going down to the Keys every August, diving for 10 days in a row at night, waiting for the coral to spawn, and that's what we'd be doing. Yeah. And then the whole game has changed.
Yeah, you guys are at the forefront of it for sure.
Yeah, and there's so many people now that are doing this, and we don't live in a vacuum, in a bubble. Like, we want people to be doing this. We want people to know how to do this. I think it can change even the hobby as well in how we produce corals for sale. It works, and we try to share as much as we can, and try to educate people about what we're doing, and work with partners across the state of Florida. Now there's multiple facilities spawning corals.
All over. They have the FCRC.
Yep, the Florida Coral Rescue Center. They came into this as part of the Florida Coral Rescue Project, where what we did with the pillar coral early on served as this blueprint for what then happened for 20 more species. Because as that disease that I was telling you about started to spread across the entire Florida Reef and now throughout the Caribbean, it's called stony coral tissue loss disease. People were like, oh my gosh, we have to actually rescue more species. It's not just the pillar coral. The pillar coral was hit the hardest. But now we have 700 or 800 corals over at the Florida Coral Rescue Center, right down the road. And now Justin, oh my gosh, is spawning all of those, and producing millions of larvae too now. So we have this constant supply now of these juvenile corals that's allowing research to happen that could just never happen before. We have researchers that are just like, what? We can just get as many larvae as we want, every year, and it's no problem. Oh, and then they get them again next month too. And so it's just opened up so many more possibilities.
That's great. Yeah. Now, over at your place, you guys have a center too as well. That's the Coral Conservation Center?
Yep. So our new facility now, we just now it's been, I guess, 2 years almost that we finished the Coral Conservation and Research Center. So originally we started with greenhouses. And, people always ask, the natural light versus the LEDs, Greenhouses did the job, but greenhouses are really meant for extending your growing season for plants, in cold weather and keeping the interior hot. And in Florida in the summer, a greenhouse is a very, very hot place to be, and it will cook everything inside of it. So even though we have really fancy greenhouses that are ventilated, they get hot, and the chilling of the systems inside of there is actually quite energy inefficient. And plus, then you have twin wall polycarbonate panels, and the spectrum is just so not what we want for corals. I mean, it actually cuts out a lot of the blue, and it's almost entirely redshift. It's the worst spectrum you would ever want. And it works. It's fine, but it's not ideal. So when we expanded, we decided to just make a block building. It's way more hurricane proof too, and do all LED lighting, and it works fine. We always did most of the spawning under LED lighting, but the settling and the raising all of the juveniles, we're doing all of that now too in the block building under LED.
So it's more efficient to light with LEDs and climate control by AC as opposed to run a greenhouse.
Yeah, it's, I don't have the data yet, but I actually set it up with different electrical meters. So we'll be able to dial in. I haven't done all the math yet, but I'll know exactly what the electricity usage is for the 3 greenhouses and what our production is out of those 3 greenhouses versus what it is in the block building. And it is something that I tend to work up after after a couple years of data to say like, all right, what really is more efficient? Because we have those 3 greenhouses have 21 tons of cooling in a chilled water loop.
Yeah, we have 14.
Yeah.
14 and a half tons here.
And I think the chilled water loop system on the
No, I'm sorry. Each unit's 14 tons.
We got 3.
Yeah.
you've got 3
We have
14
40
ton.
We have 44, 45 something tons of AC on our roof.
For the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
You're talking
And
about
then-
chilling?
Yeah, ours is the water chilling loop for the
Okay.
for the greenhouses. So I'd have to look. Yeah, we'll talk next time. We'll do a breakdown of the
Yeah.
electrical usage of worldwide corals versus the Florida Aquarium.
Tremendously different.
It's a
You know,
lot.
when we moved here, actually, it's funny because we never used heaters, so now we
Yeah.
have to have heaters because we use dehumidifiers.
Yep.
I had no clue when we built this building that the efficiency of removing the vapor from the water created that much of
Evaporative
inefficiency.
cooling.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's crazy. So now our heaters run indoor.
Yep. But it's the same
Yeah.
thing. And we've talked about, that's what we emailed about, wasn't it? The HVAC system.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we were designing the new building, I had asked like for any wisdom that you could share
Yeah.
about designing an HVAC
That was him.
system. Yeah. And, you know, we went through a lot of renditions with the engineers that
Yeah.
don't understand, you know,
They don't,
what
they don't understand what putting that much water
like
inside
have
is
this
like.
much
Yeah.
water area, like the surface area and the shallow tanks, like it is it's such a heavy load. And we've gone back and forth with the dehumidification running and then the heating load, and then it's like, well, I can't add like this much heat in this now. I have so much electrical usage and heating, like it's just
And
it's
one-
this balance.
On
1
balance,
degree
yeah.
of temperature can be the difference between all of your electrical devices getting wet
So
or the
true.
floors being slick
Yep.
versus
Which is now a
not.
safety hazard for the
Yes.
staff,
Yeah,
and the
it's-
floors are all wet. Yep.
It's such a funny thing. If that AC goes out, you know in 10 minutes.
Instantly.
tops.
Yep.
Yeah, you feel it on the floor.
And that was part of our learning curve with the new building as well, is like preventing the condensation. We've got a lot of expensive electrical equipment on these tanks.
Hundreds and hundreds
yeah.
and hundreds of devices.
Right?
Yeah, it gets
Yeah.
old.
Yeah. It's like, it's an extreme environment that is not comparable to much else, really.
It really isn't.
But it's, you know, I tell you, dealing with that, I will take any day over dealing with a greenhouse, because the humid air, the salty air in the greenhouse,
You got to
it's,
get people to work in that.
huh?
You got to get
And
people
you
to
have
work
to
in
get
that.
people to stand out there and sweat all
Yeah,
summer
that's
long.
miserable.
It
Not
is.
fun.
Yeah.
Quality of life goes out the window.
Oh, my staff barter like with each other to like who gets to go do a project in the air conditioning, like or who gets, because each person has their own area that they're responsible for, and
What do
there
they
are
say?
certain humans that are just not gonna do it out in the greenhouse.
Non-monetary form of compensation.
It's like, you get to go work on something in the air conditioning today.
That's your award. You've been bad. Get up to the greenhouse.
Yep.
No.
I'm teasing. That's great. So, when I was out at Apollo Beach location, you guys had I seen a lot of kids come through with the schools and stuff like that. Tell us about those programs you guys have over there.
Yeah, so our site is an awesome partnership between the Tampa Electric Company, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and the Florida Aquarium. So we also have FWC's Suncoast Youth Conservation Center is right on the same property. And we have this amazing fishing pond and a little like man-made marsh area, and there's kayak launches right there. So we run, both the Florida Aquarium and FWC run a ton of educational programs at the site, like teach kids to fish and kayaking camp. And it's just awesome because we have a lot of kids that will be out learning to kayak on the fishing pond and collecting the data on the fish in the pond. It's a very cool site. And then it's right by the Manatee Viewing Center. So the Manatee Viewing Center at the Big Bend Power Plant for
FPL.
TECO. Yep.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It is open from November through March.
Okay.
And then you can also now take a tram over to our site and then visit the Sea Turtle Rehabilitation Center. And then soon we're going to be building a deck that will allow you to go across and look in the windows of our new building and see some of the coral breeding work and some of the brood stock and things like that. So, and that's free to the public.
Yeah.
So you go, you see the manatees in the warm water discharge canal, and then come over, see some sea turtles in the rehab center, and then come learn about the coral program. And that's November through March.
Very cool. Yeah, we got to get back out there. I don't think Josh has been over there, have you?
Not.
No.
Nope.
We got to, you maybe go do a video over there next time we do
Oh,
a
you
video.
can go geek out on
I
electric
love the nerdy
consumption
stuff.
and HVAC. People will
I'm
love it. It'll
I'm a
get
coral
5
person
beers.
Go person first, exactly. Yeah. What you said earlier about the Baltimore Aquarium, it's great that you said that because it actually was impactful to me too as a kid.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I lived in New Jersey, and we had field trips over there. We did twice in 2 years, and that was my first exposure to an aquarium, and that kind of got me interested when I was a kid. So the same thing you're kind of doing now is like you're introducing it to the youth, and that's kind of sparking the idea of that the corals and the fish and the manatees and everything like that, all the marine life is a possibility. for them,
Yeah,
to get
that's
into.
so cool, and that's such an amazing aquarium. And aquariums can get such a bad rap, like public aquariums and even our hobby. And it's just the number of people that have been inspired to care about marine life because of a visit to the aquarium. And look at where you are now, and look at where I am. Those visits make a difference
They do.
on children.
Yeah, need exposure to it for sure.
And the level of care that is given to animals in public aquariums, especially AZA accredited public aquariums, is next level. I mean, it is world-class care.
Club Med.
Exactly. It
It's
really,
definitely
really is.
inspired more marine biology majors than we would ever account for.
100%, 100%. And the world, and now we get so much exposure on screens and the internet and stuff, but there's really nothing like being able to walk up and see something with your own eyes. And not everybody gets to go travel to go snorkel somewhere as a kid. There's a very small subset of the population that's lucky enough to do that. So to bring it into somebody's living room or bring it into the aquarium down the street or your store, people can walk through the store and kids are inspired, and it's, I've just set up tanks at home just for my neighbors' kids too, to be able to come and look and learn. And it just, it makes me... It's easy to get jaded doing what I do, and it's easy to get depressed because we're dealing with endangered species and reef ecosystems that are dying, and sometimes you want to toss your hands up in the air and just be like, what are we doing? But I went on a trip recently with my neighbors and their kids to the Keys, and we went out snorkeling, and just watching them, they're still so inspired by it. And then when they look at an aquarium, they just love it, and it just captivates them. That's what keeps me going, is if we don't have kids be inspired by it, then they won't be inspired to conserve it for the future.
I don't feel like over the years, let me rephrase that. I feel like over the years it's gotten better, but I always thought that retail was more frowned upon because most of the academic community doesn't want to see collection, resale, so on and so forth. And I feel like since I've been with the company, we've taken a good direction of trying to make things far more sustainable. And even furthermore, similar to what you're saying, educate the public and trying to get them to understand that this is 1, doable, and 2, it's sustainable, and 3, it is inspirational. So, we do spend a lot of time trying to educate a small tank buyer to understand what it is that we're doing here and how they can be impactful. And maybe you haven't seen, but our farm is pretty substantial, and we grow a lot of coral here. So the amount of coral that we sell as opposed to collect it's such a big number compared to what it used to be. So we're somewhere in the vicinity of 85 to 90% alcohol.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome, guys. That's a lot of work, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because all of that is hobbyist. And I feel like you probably would agree, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you probably would agree that since you started in 2016 with the Florida Aquarium, you probably saw an uptick in the amount of hobbyists that are working with you.
100%.
And I love that concept because
100%.
if it's not starting in a school, at least it's starting in the hobby.
100%. Yeah, no, and it's when we look at employees too, it's I want people that have, and volunteers and interns, like people that have real world aquarium keeping experience. That's what we do. That's what we specialize in, is the husbandry side of it. We do some research at our facility, but really we're a resource for scientists and researchers, in that we know how to produce the baby corals. We know how to collect enough data and get by and give them what they need and to do the research. But we're really just a resource of skilled coral aquarists.
We've made mistakes.
Yeah, that have learned the hard way.
In 2014, I went diving in Fort Lauderdale, or maybe it was south of Fort Lauderdale, whatever the case. And it was one of my first few dive trips. And when I went out there, I was already a hobbyist. And I saw just fields of freshly planted epoxy.
Oh, interesting.
And a bunch of dead acropora.
That was probably a research project, but
I was super bummed out about that. And I went back and I thought about it and I pondered and I still to this day I think to myself, hobbyists should have been more involved in the beginning. And I'm not putting this on anybody.
Yeah.
But hobbyists should have been more involved in the beginning, because a hobbyist would have said, if I put this coral in a patch of algae, I'm pretty confident it's not going to make its way through this. There's no natural predation, or there's no fish quantity, or whatever the case. It didn't work well there the first time. It's not going to work well there the second time. So just that simple concept of putting a coral in the same spot 2 times and knowing that it didn't do good there the first 2 times, you're not going to put it there a third time if you're a hobbyist. Right. And that's very, very basic. And I very generalized that. And I know they probably knew these things, right? But that's the hobbyist knowledge that we take for granted. You do it once, you do it twice, you make a mistake, you're not going to do it again the third time.
Yeah. Well, and you could look at restoration that way. Is a lot of people would even argue, like, why are we even bothering to plant corals at all if everything is dying?
Or you learn from it.
This is a valid argument. This is a really valid argument, and people ask me that question all the time. And the answer is A, I'm not giving up on the corals, and B, you learn from it, right? Like, and maybe it is site selection. Maybe that is just not the right spot. And that's something that's a whole field of research in itself in coral restoration, is what corals go in what spots and why, and how do we figure that out.
My generalization of using one section of an aquarium is far different from
a whole reef.
A whole reef.
Yeah.
But there was also
but
no
it's
other
the same
reef
concept.
there.
It's the same concept. And nearshore reefs in Fort Lauderdale, it's interesting because there used to be very large thickets of Acropora cervicornis, the staghorn coral, and there still are some. Some of the biggest thickets in Florida are right off the coast of Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, we went out to the third reef and it was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, these were near shore hard bottom. I mean, like 10 feet of water, like a couple hundred yards from the beach. Just massive thickets of staghorn coral. And they have died from disease over, since I was there in 2009. They had already started to die, but now most of them are gone. There's still some, and they're much smaller. But there was acres of staghorn coral thickets right off the beach. And those areas were people were trying to replant those for a while because they did do well there at some point. And we know that from previous satellite imagery and previous surveys. But they don't do well there now.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of restoration work happening there, but it's learning.
Think it's pollution or?
Ooh, that is such a deep question.
Dangerous topic.
It is a dangerous topic, but I do believe that one of the primary problems for Florida's reefs is land-based pollution. I do. It's organic runoff. I think is actually greatly overlooked. I mean, we can sit and question nitrogen levels and phosphorus levels and the ratios and the balance and all of that.
Red tide.
But we don't even measure a lot of the organic levels on a regular basis on our reefs and in our aquariums. I think it's just a greatly overlooked thing that has a huge
difficult to
impact.
test for.
It's just so expensive. I mean, and it changes so rapidly that the amount of testing you would need to do to really understand it is sort of next level. And there is some work done on that on reefs, but how do algae play into that, because they actually release organic compounds that then feed coral disease. Is the algae growing more because of the inorganic nutrients? So,
Well, it's compounded. I mean,
Yeah.
as soon as you lose a reef, you lose a structure.
Yeah.
As soon as you lose a structure, you lose a livestock.
you lose the whole balance.
Yeah, the fish are gone, and then there's no natural predation. Then algae takes
Yeah.
over, and then what do? You
And
got to go backwards.
I believe that the warming ocean temperatures, changing climate, more often having heat waves, is just fueling some things that were already existing due to land-based pollution, and then the two together is just a recipe for disaster.
Agreed.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is, and we can't end this on a sad note.
So,
But this is why we do what we do,
Exactly.
is trying to look for a better answer
Sure.
than just continue to frag the same corals over and over again that weren't doing well in the first place.
Yeah.
We need to try to breed a stronger coral, and that's a big task, and it's not going to be solved just by the Florida Aquarium. There are people all over the world working on this. Tons of great work in Australia at Ames, tons of great work in the States, in Hawaii, and we'll figure it out. It may not be as diverse of a reef as it once was, but there are corals that will live, and hopefully we can breed some heat tolerance into species like the elkhorn coral, or make the Symbiont that's heat tolerant that'll just stay put when we put it in the ocean.
We need more people that care.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we do.
We're going to continue to do our part and bring in the hobbyists that
I
care and
appreciate
do a
it.
good job.
Appreciate it.
And hopefully
Yeah.
you guys continue to do what you do with the support that you need.
Well, and I've got 14 staff now that are just as passionate about it as I am, so they're the next generation too that'll carry it on. Even it's not all going to happen in my lifetime, even. So it's just
True.
the beginning of a long
Generations,
generations
It's gonna be a
of
mission.
work.
Yeah. Maybe beyond our lifetime,
Yeah.
But we're laying down the foundation now for the future of that.
Exactly.
So important. That's great. Now, you say you have 14 over there.
Yeah, it's
Wow,
crazy.
you
It
guys
was
grown a
just
lot.
it was just two of us when it started. It
you have
was
a great
really
staff.
one husbandry person
Wow.
and one facilities person, and that's it.
Yeah. So what's on the books for the future, the near future for you guys?
Oh my gosh. We want to do more of this international collaboration and crossbreeding work. I think that's really important. Corals don't know international boundaries, and the corals' larvae can travel in currents for days and even weeks. So I think to build a stronger population, we need to mix the population. So we are going to be looking at, trying to do more of these international collaborations and international breeding efforts. That's important for us. And really it's continuing to just figure out what works best and learn from the mistakes and keep trying to build a stronger coral. Right now, we're building a classroom, actually. We're working on a training program. So like I said, we want to share our knowledge as much as possible. So we're building like a formalized training program with online modules. And not to say that our way is the way and this is how you should do it, but at least to teach people, what we've learned in the past 9 years. And give them the building blocks to keep experimenting and keep doing new things. That's what aquarists are great at, is ingenuity and figuring things out. So we have a new training program coming up, and then we're going to have a classroom with a wet lab where we can host visiting scientists and trainees to learn how to program a spawning system and what to do when the corals actually spawn and how to do it all with hands-on training as well.
Yeah. Our goal is to have some kind of classroom here one day.
Nice.
teach the hobby, kind of the same thing, like to the youth and
Yeah.
people trying to learn and figure this out. It's not easy for anybody, especially
No.
starting out.
Well, and we've come so far though in just being able to kind of get, like you said, the small aquarium, first time person getting into the hobby, like get them the foundational knowledge to be successful, like changes the whole game. You want
it's
set
about
people
breaking
up
down
for
the
success.
barrier of entry, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, big time. It really is making it accessible to people and teach them. Like we teach them in the beginning, when they get their foot in the door. Start small. Practice good husbandry. Once you get that down, then kind of graduate to a bigger tank if you want. But nothing wrong with something small. Like that's a 25-gallon tank over there.
Stunning.
We have about Thank you. We have about 80 corals in there, maybe more. I mean, you can do a lot with that tank for sure. 3 fish. It's doing well. So, you have anything for us? Any questions about worldwide corals while you're here?
Oh, I just want to definitely go take a walk around and look at everything, and maybe get something to bring home to inspire the neighbors' kids.
Yeah. How's your home project going?
I've got a rack or two of acanthophilia babies at home that are about that big now, like
Wow.
1.5 to 2 centimeters.
And how old is that?
That is now like 1.5 years. So
I knew they were going to be slow.
yeah, they're slow, but admittedly, I also do nothing to them. Like I have not, I have no time. So I got all the free time in the world to just also raise acanthophilia babies. I do nothing to them, and they, if I was pumping them with food and playing around more with it, I mean, I don't even dose anything to that tank. I just let it. I just do a water change once a week, and that's it. I do nothing.
Wow.
Literally nothing. I feed them when I feel like it,
Yeah.
and I do nothing except an occasional water change. And they're fine. They're growing. They're just not growing very fast. They could grow a lot faster.
Yeah.
Like I bet, like if I pushed it, they could be an inch and a half by now if I was pushing it. Because the bigger ones are getting towards the inch size with me doing nothing.
Are they displaying color?
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, not stripy, unfortunately. Wouldn't that be nice if they all came out rainbow? Yeah, that didn't happen.
So the variation is different from one to the next?
Oh yeah, there's definitely orange ones, red ones, green ones. Yeah, and
Pretty
some.
bright.
So I have one that's a true chimera that actually fused, so it has a nice line down the middle, and it's green on one side and orange on the
Nice.
other side. And they're a little small to kind of tell. I think at this point if they're gonna end up with more striping to them. Like you can see there's a lot of like speckling in them, and it doesn't appear to have much to do with which parent it was, because I also tried to keep track of because I had some orange ones and green ones and different patterns, and I don't think that made much of a difference. But they're still changing though.
Yeah.
So you didn't see nearly as much of the coloration even like 6 months ago as you do now. So it's going to be interesting to
Good
see
progress,
what
huh?
happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to get some good photos of them. I haven't put photos up in ages.
Oh. Yeah.
Maybe
that's
it's something you can share for this.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Well, Carrie, thanks so much. I think we'll head over to the store now and show you around the farm and let you see what we got going
Yeah,
on.
for
It'll be your
sure.
first time, right?
Oh, second time.
Second
Yeah,
time,
but
okay.
it's been a while.
Been
yeah.
a while.
Yeah.
Okay. We've last year and a half, I would say things have gotten much better as far as it's always been good, but like we've stepped it up our coral game.
Well, we've been here for now almost 7 years,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it finally settled into its own.
Nice.
Display tanks are looking great, and the raceways, the farm looks great.
That's
so we're
wild.
having a
So
good time.
you guys moved into this
Same time
place
as
from
you?
the. That's so
Yeah,
wild.
Yeah. Same time. Yeah. So yeah, next time we'll have a trip over there. We'll bring Josh over there.
Yeah.
Plan something probably next couple of months.
Definitely.
And,
It's going to be a long trip.
Yeah.
I got a lot of questions.
Well, thanks so much, Carrie.
Oh, it was great
Appreciate it.
seeing you
Yeah,
guys.
Great
and
conversation.
We'll go for a walk.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe, and hit the like button if you like what you see. And stay tuned for more great podcast videos like this one. Take care.